next episode of the Hormone Café. Today I want to talk about what to look for in an electrolyte powder. On this holistic fertility and health and hormone balancing journey that I've been on, that I'm taking you all with me on, is the consequence of that is that I've become a really anal label reader, and every package I like to turn it over and look at the back. And one of those products that I found that often has artificial sweeteners or ingredients that may or may not be good for us are electrolytes. So today we're going to talk about what to look for in electrolyte powder, and then should we be drinking electrolytes every day? Are they truly good for us? So when we think about electrolytes, the most common ones are sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium. So when we think about sodium is really good for hydration, and then it also helps rebuild nerves. So it's good for our nervous system. It's good for our muscle contraction, and then it's also good for our blood pressure. Whereas potassium is good for our heart rhythm, our muscle contraction, our blood pressure, and then cellular energy. And then magnesium is really good for energy production and muscle relaxation and glucose metabolism, which is why it can be really helpful for sleep as well. And then about even 3 to 10% of all people in the United States are deficient in magnesium. So it's really common to be deficient in electrolytes. So what are some symptoms that we might have if we're low in electrolytes? So big ones are fatigue, headaches, brain fog, lightheadedness, nausea, or muscle cramps. So another question is, do we actually need electrolytes? Like, do we need electrolytes every single day? And the answer is no. We don't really need electrolytes for maintenance. You don't necessarily need electrolytes in addition to what you're already eating or drinking every single day, unless you have certain symptoms. So the obvious ones are if you're quickly losing electrolytes, and the most common way to lose electrolytes is from having diarrhea or sweating. So definitely if you are having a GI bug, you're having a lot of diarrhea, you're losing a lot of water through your gut, you're definitely going to want to be repleting that with electrolytes. Or if you're sweating a lot, because if you're doing a really hard workout, you're really hot because it's hot outside, you were in a sauna or a hot tub, then you're also going to want to replete your electrolytes. The other thing is that if we're throwing up, then that's also a way to lose electrolytes, so we definitely want to replete those. So if we're sweating a lot or throwing up or having diarrhea, we're going to need an electrolyte with a lot of sodium. So then you're going to want to choose an electrolyte powder with closer to 1,000 or 2,000 milligrams of sodium. If we're not sweating really hard, we do not need that much sodium. So if you're a person who you're doing a big workout outside and you're sweating, then you're going to want to pick a high sodium electrolyte. If you're not sweating that much, or you don't have diarrhea, you're not throwing up, then you're going to want to have an electrolyte with lower sodium. So more on a day-to-day use, you want to choose a lower sodium content electrolyte. So if we don't exactly need electrolytes every day, then when should we take electrolytes? So electrolytes are really helpful if you're experiencing brain fog because of the fact that they help rebuild nerves. They can really help with mental clarity. So if you're experiencing brain fog, that's when you want to have electrolytes. If you have headaches, it can really be helpful to have electrolytes because electrolytes are helpful in monitoring our blood pressure, and sometimes headaches can be caused by subtle changes in our blood pressure. Fatigue is another big one. Electrolytes can increase energy production and increase cortisol levels. So if you're exhausted, then have a giant glass of electrolyte water. Some of my favorite times to have electrolyte water are the first thing when I wake up in the morning. I like to have a big glass of water, and especially it's helpful to have a big glass of electrolyte water because then it helps my cortisol production from the very beginning. Or in the middle of the afternoon, if I feel like I'm having a crash, I like to have a big glass of electrolyte water with a high protein snack because then it'll give my cortisol levels a little boost to get me through the afternoon. So times of fatigue, it can be really helpful to drink electrolytes. If you're feeling lightheaded, electrolytes will be helpful. If you have difficulty concentrating or you feel dizzy, then I would drink electrolytes. And then, of course, after exercise, electrolytes have been shown to improve endurance, reduce cramping, and make for faster recovery. So if you're working out, then you want to have a glass of electrolytes right within 1 to 2 hours of working out. Also, if you're having sugar cravings, I highly recommend either drinking a big glass of water or a big glass of electrolyte water, because electrolytes help appetite regulation. Sometimes when our brain when you think that you have a sugar craving, it can actually mean that you're dehydrated or you're depleted in sodium. So if you're like, oh, I just had this terrible sugar craving, I really want to eat something sweet, the first thing I would do is drink a big glass of electrolytes, see if that gets better, especially if it's right before bed, because it's really hard on your system to eat a bunch of sugar before bed because it will cause a glucose spike followed by an insulin spike. Instead, you want to make sure that you're not dehydrated or low in sodium. Or if you do have a lot of late night cravings, try to get electrolytes in earlier in the day and see if that helps with your late night cravings. So not that we need to have electrolytes every single day as a maintenance, but if you're having any of those symptoms, I would definitely drink a big glass of electrolyte water because it can be helpful. So other things that we want to look for is we want to make sure that it's sourced properly. So we want our electrolytes to just be truly electrolytes. So we want to look at our magnesium, our sodium, our chloride, our potassium, and then some electrolyte powders will have calcium in them. And then you want to look at the amount. So if you're doing a high sodium electrolyte, you're going to have about 1,000 milligrams of sodium. But then if you're going to do something lower, you're going to be having about 80 to 100 milligrams of sodium. And then you want around 60 milligrams of magnesium. And then you want around 200-ish milligrams of potassium. So in this journey that I've been learning about, because I love electrolytes, I think they make me feel a lot better when I have low energy or when I'm having a crash or when I'm having difficulty concentrating. But it's really tough because all the electrolytes out there, they almost all have either some kind of artificial sweetener or some kind of an artificial flavoring. So I highly recommend that you get an unflavored electrolyte powder. And if you need the flavor or you need the sweetness, just flavor it or sweeten it yourself. Because a lot of people say, well, unflavored, it's gross, it tastes like ocean water, and it really does. It does taste very salty, especially the high sodium ones. However, almost every single flavored electrolyte is going to have some kind of artificial flavor, and almost always stevia and monk fruit. And like I've talked about before, I really try to stay away from artificial sweeteners, because when you're giving your body electrolytes, you want to be giving it something savory, right? We're not trying to give it something sweet. So we want to train our bodies when we're giving something sweet, when we're giving our bodies sugar, we're ramping up our metabolism so that we can metabolize that sugar, right? But we don't want to be giving our body artificial sugar because it will train our metabolism that when we're giving it fake sugar and no calories with that, to slow down our metabolisms over time. So when we want something sweet, we want it to be actual sugar that our body can then process those calories. We don't want to be tricking our metabolisms into eating fake sugar or something that's going to hit our glucose receptors, but then not be followed by a caloric density that our body's going to be trying to metabolize. So when we want protein, we want something savory, right? When we want electrolytes, we want just electrolytes. When we want something sweet, we want something sugary, okay? Don't combine those, separate them. So I highly recommend either you make your own electrolytes or you buy a very unflavored electrolyte powder and then flavor it yourself by either squeezing in a lemon, squeezing in a lime, muddling some mint, putting in some peppermint extract, something like that. So in this whole journey, I also decided to just make my own electrolyte powder because I was so sick of scanning the internet for all of these electrolytes and finding that they had all these crazy ingredients. So I'll kind of walk you through that journey of what we decided to put in our electrolytes and why. So one thing that I really wanted to do was make our sodium content on the lower end, because I want this to be an electrolyte powder that you could just have every single day, and not only when you're sweating or you have diarrhea, something that you could have if you're really tired or have more on a day-to-day basis. So we, in our electrolytes, we put in pink Himalayan salt, and it has 95 milligrams of sodium. So it's not a very high sodium electrolyte. It's more of a daily repletion electrolyte. And then it has magnesium bisglycinate to help with our muscles and our muscle relaxation. And then it has potassium. So ours has 178 milligrams of potassium. And then what I learned is I had to go a lot back and forth with my food scientist because I was learning all about electrolytes and why they had to have certain things in them. And one thing that I realized is that electrolytes are electrolytes, so they can interact with other things. And so in order to balance the mineral load and balance the pH, there needs to be something else in there. And so oftentimes companies will put citric or malic acid to balance that mineral load. But those acids are really natural. For example, citric acid is what gives lemons that kind of like tart flavor. So I said, okay, that makes sense. Why we have to have citric acid in our electrolytes, because we really want to balance that pH. And then I was very passionate about having only natural flavors because I'm looking at all these other electrolytes and they have all kinds of things. And one of the electrolytes that I looked at, it just had an ingredient called flavors. I was like, flavors? What is flavors? So when you're looking at electrolytes, make sure the flavor is something that you actually know what it is. So healthy ones, like I've seen lemon juice, lemon oil, lime juice. You really want it to have a flavor that you recognize as an actual thing. So in ours, I decided to put lemon extract. So it's literally just lemon, powdered lemon, because I wanted to have some kind of a flavor and not be completely gross, but I was very passionate about having new artificial sweeteners. And then another thing that you want to look for is, in addition to sweeteners, right? So we don't want to have any monk fruit, stevia, Reb A, which is sometimes seen as rabonicide, and we don't want to also have sucralose. Those are artificial sweeteners. If you need it to be sweet and you're thinking, okay, I don't want to add my own sugar or my own honey or anything like that, and I just want it to be sweet, then you want it to have literally cane sugar or dextrose. Like if it's going to be sweet, you want it to have actual sugar in it, okay? Not artificial sugar. So you want to look at the content usually of sodium, and then make sure usually a good electrolyte will have magnesium and potassium in it. Some of them will have calcium, some of them won't. We want to look at the sweetener, right? I highly recommend that we don't do artificial sweeteners, that if we have to have it sweet, we sweeten it ourselves, or do literally sugar. We want to look at the flavors, right? Make sure it's not natural and artificial flavors. We want it to have a flavor that we actually recognize. And then another thing that I recommend is that your electrolyte powder is very pure. Some electrolytes will have things like vitamin C or vitamin B6 or vitamin B12. And sometimes you might think, oh, well, that vitamins are good for me, right? Might as well throw those in. But you actually want everything that you're putting into your body to be very pure. I've had people, for example, come to me and they have an overdose of vitamin B6 because they were taking supplements and electrolytes and protein powder, and everything that they were taking had vitamin B6, and they felt super duper sluggish because they just had way too many B vitamins on board. So I prefer that everything that you take is very pure and the very minimal, like only 1 or 2 or 3 ingredients, so that you know exactly what it is and we're not stacking too many things on top of each other. So yes, of course our body needs vitamins, but if you need vitamin B12, then let's get it through food or through a vitamin B12 supplement and not through our electrolytes, right? And if we don't need vitamin B12 or B6, we don't need to be taking it. We don't need to be putting something in our bodies that it doesn't need, especially every day if we're going to have electrolytes quite often. So just make sure it's really pure. Like I recommend that it doesn't have any added vitamins in it. And then also sometimes electrolytes will have a color in it. Just make sure it's a natural color. So natural colors will come from things like turmeric or beet juice, not from artificial dyes. And then the last thing is that sometimes an electrolyte will have to have a binder in it because otherwise we're just having salt. So sometimes it will have the salt plus something else to kind of hold the salt. I think of it as like a holder. So for our kind of like holder or binder, we decided to use inulin because inulin is a prebiotic fiber that's found naturally in things like asparagus, onions, garlic. Some of them, for example, have maltodextrin, but that's more of a sugar. So I really wanted ours to be a very natural prebiotic fiber binder and not something that was too sweet or too artificial. So in the whole journey, that's all the things that I've been learning about electrolytes is what we decided to put into our electrolytes. So your homework for the week, I want you to, number one, think about your symptoms, okay? So if you're feeling a bit dizzy, if you're feeling a bit lightheaded, if you have brain fog, then I want you to either make your own electrolytes, get a really high quality electrolyte powder, or buy our electrolytes and use them to feel amazing every single day. And I would love to hear what you think. I'm always trying to make our processes, everything that we offer, I'm always trying to make them better. So I'd love to hear what you think about our electrolytes. So give them a taste, send me a picture, send me a video, DM me on Instagram. I would love to hear what you think about our electrolytes. But homework this week, audit your symptoms, drink some electrolytes, make sure they're making you feel better. Make sure you check your electrolytes. They need to be high quality, not have artificial sweeteners, and then not have any artificial additives. If it does have an additive like a coloring or a binder, it needs to be from a natural source only, okay? Message me. I cannot wait to hear what you think of our electrolyte powder. I'm very excited about this. If you need any help or any guidance, I do a lot of nutrition work. Our nutritionist, Callie, does a lot of work. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Hormone Cafe. Can't wait for you to join us for our next episode.